So much of what we talk about at Commerce Next involves data. And as Peter Drucker, the management consultant author, says, culture eats strategy for breakfast. So we're going to hear from FTD CEO Charlie Cole on building a data-driven culture. On his way to being a CEO, Charlie has run online marketing. He's been an analyst. He's been a chief digital officer. So for many of you, he's walked in your shoes. And I am excited to have Charlie now as a CEO talk about what he's been doing at FTD in terms of building a data-driven culture. So I'd like to turn things over to Charlie now.
Hey, thanks, Scott, and happy to be here, everyone. I feel like at this point in time is normally when I would have seen a bunch of you for the last couple of days, and with all good prayers in the world, we'll be doing that the next time around. So hope everybody stayed safe and healthy throughout this whole weird time. I'm here to talk to you about something that's very near and dear to my heart, which is kind of a data-driven culture. And for those that don't know me, I've been in the e-commerce space for about 15 years, and I actually started as an analyst, and I'm a statistician, mathematician by education. And so I came into this kind of industry in a formative, educational way, and I've gotten to see this concept of data kind of evolve over the last 15 years. And the actual title of this kind of dog and pony day is building a data-driven culture, and I'm going to try to address it from a couple of different ways. I'm now a CEO. I'm a CEO at FTD. We are a network of 9,000 florists and 2 consumer-facing websites, proflowers.com and ftd.com. And so now I kind of get to build it however I want. And I'm acutely aware that not all of you have that luxury. But in my case, I've also lived it at the manager, director, VP, SVP level, CDO level, through both startups, big companies like Samsonite and Tumi and Lucky Brand, smaller e-commerce companies like Shift Nutrition. I want to try to address it from every angle, knowing that all of you can influence building a data-driven culture more or less so than others. So hopefully you find that helpful. I'm going to follow on some slides just because I feel like some people learn verbally, some people can read. I will tell you my slides are not read slides, but hopefully they're helpful just to contextualize what I'm saying. And so with that, as I mentioned, we're here to talk about building a data-driven culture. I think the first thing I want to point out about this is there has been this conflation of data, analytics, and data science over the last 6 years, 5 years, that I blame largely from people like me. People sitting here at conferences like this, trying to regale you with stories of data science. People use words like programmatic, people use words like algorithmic. But the first step in building a data-driven culture is you have to differentiate between these 3 things. Because if you promise everyone this concept of data science or data analytics, I'm here to tell you, you're kind of missing the boat a little bit. And so what I did is I actually pulled from the Oxford Dictionary for both data and analytics the definition. And then they didn't have a definition for data science specifically because it's 2 words. But I did pull the first Google listing that talks about data science and got their definition. So let's just talk about these one by one, and I'll try to translate it. So data are facts and statistics collected together for reference or analysis. Collected. Facts and statistics collected together. So data is a spreadsheet. Data is a bunch of numbers written on a cocktail napkin. Data is a multiplication table. The concept of data is that no conclusions are drawn. You have a raw set of numbers that now need to contextualize with a story. So when we talk about a data-driven culture, it's being driven by numbers, but the data themselves are an input, not an output. And that's where analytics come in. This idea of, and I'll use the Oxford definition again, this is systematic computational analysis of data or statistics. Now, I don't know about you, I don't love it when the word for the definition is one of the words that is the word itself. So the systematic computational analysis of data or statistics, when you have analysts drawing conclusions from those numbers, now you're actually doing analytics, now you're actually doing analysis. Here's my biggest pet peeve that's happened again in the last 5 years. The biggest confusion that's being happened is every analyst is trying to turn themselves into a data scientist. They are completely different things. right? So if I'm looking at sales trends month over month over month, and I say to you, wow, our sales trend is growing. Yes, that is basic analytics, but that is not data science. And I think this can be represented because when I pulled up the first Google search, at least for me, I know based in the world of personalization, you might have different Google results. This idea of data science came up. Data science is the field of study that combines domain expertise, programming skills, and knowledge of mathematics and statistics to extract meaningful insights from data. Now, if you are sitting there on the other side of this camera representing yourself as a data scientist and you cannot program, and you can't actually represent advanced mathematics, advanced correlations, statistical analysis, seasonal indices, R-squared correlation coefficients, all this stuff, you ain't a data scientist. You're an analyst. And why do I start here? I start here because you need to clarify your goals. And you need to accurately represent what you want your organization to do en masse, on special, and basically hyper specialists. So when we talk about FTD, I joined in March, and when you join a new company, you have this unfair advantage, right? Where you kind of come in with no systemic biases, no kind of ideas of what's right or wrong. And I'm here to tell you, if you ever start a new job, being new rules, because you get to come into it with a fresh perspective. And you know the goal, right? Your goal is you're building a data-driven culture. But there's a whole lot of who, what, where, when, why, how, if, when, all these sort of things that you need to do can get from point A to point B. And so there's nothing wrong with kind of starting with a very idealistic view. And so for us, after about a month or two, we coalesced the entire team together and said, look, I want to put up on the wall, metaphorically, what we're calling our strategic initiatives. And our strategic initiatives are, we've got to accomplish these 6 things if we want to accomplish our larger goals. Our larger goals of being the absolute best partner to our florists. Our larger goals of providing the best customer experience in the entire industry. Our larger goals of being a super fun place to work where we're all rewarded. All these things. These 6 things are what we need to do. One of those 6 things was this idea of data democratization. What do I mean by data democratization? That is, any person, anytime within the company can pull the data they need. And this gets a little bit touchy, right? Because do we want all the data? What if the data is confidential? What if the data is insider and actually could be useful to our competitors? Those are real conversations that you have to have before you decide what data-driven means to you. And so, again, this idea of being new is a huge advantage. But if you're not new, just pretend like you are. Because a data infrastructure, what it starts with the technical basics. So generally, you should build a system to your panacea, to what you exactly want it to be, and don't be limited by your current realities. So I can feel a lot of you on the other side of this camera or the other side of wherever you may be on your phone. Whether you're on Salesforce, Hybris, Shopify, BigCommerce, whether you're on SAP, NetSuite, all these ERP and e-commerce platforms, whatever CRM you're on, whatever CDP you're on, I'm here to tell you it doesn't matter, right? When you start thinking about the data-driven world and culture that you want to live in, you should forget about all that. And you should start to think about, what is the culture I want? What I wanted as the CEO of FTD is I wanted every single person in the company to have access to the data they needed. And that's an important word, access. That means they can pull it themselves. That means we're not limited to a world of analysts and data science. You, right now on this call, you said to yourself, man, I wonder how much our CRM grew last night. You could figure it out for yourself. That's the culture I wanted, right? Now, that doesn't mean it's the right culture for you. So we wanted to free up our analysts and data scientists to be just that, to be analysts, to be data science, to be actually doing the hard work of correlations and making these numbers make sense. But I wanted everybody in the company to be able to query data. And query is an important word. That doesn't mean they're all analysts. That doesn't mean they're all data science, but they all have access to it. It starts first, and this is hard. Okay, and so this seems like the obvious slide to end all slides, but it's important you start ruthlessly pragmatic about your realities. So what do I mean by that? there's a lot of realities that a lot of times people go sight unseen. First off, what is your company structure? In my case, we're private equity based. Some people are early stage ventures. Some people are late stage ventures. Some are public. Some are nonprofit. Why does that matter? Some are in medical. Data is going to have different fungibility, different confidentiality, different accessibility, depending on the type of company you're a part of and the type of industry you're in. So you have to take your world of this panacea you want to live in and then bring it back slightly to reality. If you're in healthcare, governance is going to be your worst nightmare, right? You have to be really careful about what data is accessed by whom and when and how. That's just the reality you're living in. So you don't get to have whatever you want. You have to start to bring it back to reality. The classic example of this that we all live in the e-commerce space, credit card information, PII. Lord knows you sat through a half dozen of these things based on what is fully able to be circulated around your company, what has to be hashed, what has to be destroyed. And then it's just kind of complicated by these right to be forgotten ads. All of that needs to contextualize as you're starting your culture. Secondly, and this is important, what does your board care about? So do you really know the answer to this question? Like, do you know right now what your board of directors wants, what their goal is? Is it a monetization event? Chances are, early stage, late stage, private equity, you're here to get sold. You're here to monetize. And that can happen any number of ways. It could be an IPO, it could be a SPAC, it could be an acquisition, whatever. But that reality is going to bracket what they say is important and therefore limit or encourage your investment. So stay with me on this. If your board of directors and says, we're going to sell in 3 years, immediately, remember that panacea of data you lived in? Bracket it to what you can accomplish to actually drive the business in a thoughtful way within 3 years. If you don't do that, your head's in the clouds and you're not living in a world of pragmatism and reality. You always need to think about what your board of directors' goals are because they hold the purse strings. They're going to be the ones that decide how much money you get and on what time frame. And I'm telling you right now, that gets a little weird in a public company. I won't name names, but in my past, I've been a part of some public companies. And I'm here to tell you, the board of directors was really kind of there for self-preservation. They were really there to kind of keep the lights on, keep themselves in the board seat. In a lot of these eras, it brings in this dreaded comp discussion because chances are any meaningful data infrastructure project is going to span longer than a year, meaning longer than a comp cycle. So you're going to have to invest money now that will be capitalized and sit on your books for 3 to 7 years that you're going to have it pay off in maybe a time longer than the board of directors would be there. Or maybe it'll be multiple CEOs. It'll probably certainly be multiple SVPs and C-suite people. So if you're going to start this project, you might as well root it in the reality of what you can actually accomplish before the people above you knock it down. And yes, as a CEO, I think about this stuff. I think about what my board will empower and not empower based on what I know about their goals. And that kind of leads to the last one. Who's your boss? Pardon me, Tony Danza, but my boss is my board of directors. Your boss is whoever it is. The departmental motivations are important. So let's say you are the VP of e-commerce. You might report to the COO, the CDO, the CMO, whatever. Understanding that individual and their personal motivations and the company motivations needs to be a factor in your decision-making on what success looks like for how you drive a data-driven culture and how quickly. These internal battles matter because everybody in retail right now wants to put on their resume data-driven executive. How many of them actually are? Hey, that's debatable. But starting with this kind of harsh reality of what's going on underneath the surface of both the company, the bureaucracy, and individuals is important because it helps you actually drive to what you can get done. And then you get to start the fun part, right? You get to start these key questions of who is fulfilling data requests? So go back to what I want. I want this answer to be you, right? I want this answer to be you get to get whatever data you want, whenever you want, from whoever you want. And from there, you can do it all yourself. I want to drive a self-service culture. However, in this world of governance, and in this world of certain people can do certain things and you can't, privacy, they matter, you need to answer that question. What does your data-driven culture, who are the gatekeepers going to be? Is it going to be 50 people that have database access? Are you going to make self-service tools? Start there. And then what format of data do you need? Do you need raw spreadsheets? Do you need charts? Do you need PDFs? I actually think data and PDF are oxymoronic, but to each their own. Ask that question, because chances are your CEO might not want raw data in a spreadsheet or in a SQL server or in a Looker, right? You need to answer that question, because your culture is going to be limited by if people actually use this stuff. If you don't ask the question, what format do they need it to be consumed, to be used, you're done and arrival. You're not going to have a data-driven culture. How long does it take to get data, to change, to actually drive your systems? That's going to, again, bracket the chances of success. If you problem something now and people aren't live in 18 months, chances are it's dying the vine. Finally, self-service options I've talked a little bit about. The fifth box is probably the most important, which is, does everyone actually know what the key pieces of data are? When I joined FTD, it took us 2 months, meeting on a daily, weekly basis to discuss what are the key unit economics that we should be looking at all the time. Do that work, because chances are what you're looking at today is wrong. Conversion rate in a vacuum is wrong. It needs to be contextualized by traffic. Customer service in a vacuum is wrong. Is it a byproduct of shipping times, product quality, misrepresentation on the website, price to quality ratio? Unpack these unit economics and dig into what actually matters, what actually is the building block of your company. And then finally, this is where I see a lot of these projects die. Data within the marketing department, easy. How is marketing driving merchandising? Hard. Identify those tension points on day one and make sure you're making cross-referential data points that allow people to compare the data points that matter. Do that ahead of time. For example, UI, UX, tech, merchandising, marketing. All of them need to live in the same bucket because they're cross-referential, and usually you can't analyze a pitfall or a success unless you contextualize all four. The goals of this for me, and again, this is where I kind of shift from the educational and hypothetical to reality. No one needs to ask for data, they can pull it themselves. That to me is true data-driven culture, because otherwise it's all just BS, right? Now, I want to asterisk that right after I say it. I get it if you're in a world of governance where it's not that easy. Mea culpa on that. But for most of you, if you're selling wrenches or fruit or socks or jeans, we're not dealing with trade secrets here. Give people access to pull it themselves. You're going to be more efficient. You're going to move faster. And frankly, you kind of call bullshit on everybody, right? You allow them to go and get it themselves. Instead of them saying like, well, I would have made that decision, but I didn't have access to it. You want to kind of break off all of those little pieces of scar tissue that allow people to drive the results themselves. And you spin up a little entrepreneurship within your company. Your data scientists and analysts, you're paying these people a ton of money. Like, data scientists are so hard to find, and you're certainly not finding one for less than 200 grand. Get them out of the query business. Get them into the science business and the analysis business. You're optimizing your P&L, you're optimizing your money, and every dollar you're spending is being optimized to their best of their abilities. Everyone in the company knows how the business is doing. What a novel concept. If you're in a company of 500 to 1,000 people and you're not public, and you ask the question to your entire company, hey, how are we doing? Do you think people really know the answer to that question? That is making people feel empowered. This is where you get into the soft stuff, the qualitative stuff. You get people who feel like they're more invested in the company's present, future, and past because they actually know what's going on. I think you set up with a better culture that way. And then the bucket that I leave here before I go to my last page is you're actually compensating on what matters. For example, my data team at FTD is compensated for how many people are pulling their own reports. They are compensated for where they can actually drive meaningful change in the business, as opposed to, I pulled this many queries, I have this many reports, I want other people to do that. I'm actually paying them to offload work that they shouldn't be doing because I want tools to be self-service. You cannot build a data-driven culture without having a hard look at your compensation structure, specifically mid and long-term comp. That gets really, really hard to do, and frankly, people usually don't do it. I'm going to leave you guys with these kind of tactics, and I want to leave it with a slide that I think are a little bit more ubiquitous, as I've kind of slid back and forth between my personal designs and what I think is more of an academic lens. Carve out budgets for experimentation. Where this gets caught up is when you have a data-driven culture, testing hypotheses and then deciding if they're real, it gets caught up in this comp structure. It gets caught up in the compensation structure. Do away with it. Just say, look, hey, marketing team, 10% of your budget, it's testing. It doesn't count against your yearly or monthly metrics. We do that, by the way. Compensate. Those two buckets or the top two buckets are related directly to each other. I talked about these key unit economics. Have a second look at them. They're probably not what you have right now. Conversion rate's a stupid metric, right? Are you dividing your marketing to top, middle, bottom? Do you actually have a view into the lenses that matter as opposed to kind of the ones that are spoon-fed to you by an analytical platform? Have a monthly metrics meeting with the entire company. We do it. More good questions come out of that meeting than any other meeting. Just do it. Try to get it going. Try to push it within a department if you can't do it the whole company. Be very clear on what numbers come from, what systems. Be ruthless. If you're going to report on average order value, define it. Where's it coming from? It can't be both Google Analytics, your e-commerce platform, and your ERP. Pick one. Systems of record matters. And finally, self-service and passive metrics allow you to basically call BS on people who say they don't have access and can't do it. So for all of you, I hope this is a little bit helpful because I intentionally jumped back and forth between what we're doing and kind of more of an academic lens. As always, if I can be helpful, I'm not hard to find. Charlie Cole on LinkedIn, ccole@ftdi.com, and I hope the rest of the show is awesome for you guys. See y'all soon, hopefully in person.